Now, I know the title of this video is, something along the lines of 7 books that may stay with you for the rest of your life, or top 10 books that'll make you rich in fucking 5 minutes. Some bullshit like that. But I want you to understand that this video isn't one of them, those guru self-help fucking, like, the go read Think and Grow Rich and don't take any notes, or go read The Rational Male and become a Sigma. Which, they are good books to be fair, but the way people read them nowadays kind of creates them into some sort of fallacy which isn't any good. You don't actually want a list of, the best books ever written. Instead, you should want books that'll do you, do something for you. And books that'll shift your perspective, there's quite an abundance of them. Which is why I'm going to talk to you about them today. Now, again, this isn't going to be like one of those videos with the high stim cuts, edits, blah, blah, blah. All I'm going to be talking about is the book's name, the author, and basically the premise of the book. And this video idea, I've had it planned for a bit, but one of my viewers left a comment, thank you very much, talking about them wanting me to make a video based on what books they should read. Now, I'm all for guidance. However, I do believe that you should also fall into your own type of genre. When I read Think and Grow Rich, I thought that it was an amazing book, just because of the realism that applied to my real life. However, then when I read a bunch of philosophy, such as, No Longer Human by, what's his name? Osamu Dazai, I also thought that that was amazing because of its philosophical application to reality. So I think you should really, get a feel for reading your own, applied books, like books that will, stick with you for the rest of your life, instead of simply following some list. However, here is that list. I know, a bit contradictory, but... So, the first book I'll start with is called The Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Now, Viktor Frankl, I think he was a Holocaust survivor, and he was also a psychiatrist, which my apologies if I'm wrong about that, because it is a very sensitive topic. However, the book itself isn't simply a Holocaust memoir. Instead, the book is a manual for suffering. Frankl, which, like I said, he was a psychiatrist and a survivor of the Holocaust, he doesn't ask himself how he should avoid pain in this book. Instead, he asks how meaning in pain can be found. And he answers it in this book with a quiet, an honest and a zero pretension, zero bullshit response, which, if you are in a dark place, the book can help you a lot. Not by dragging you into the light, but instead giving you a candle so you can find your own way out. Now, the next book is The War of Art by Steven Pressfield, not to be confused with The Art of War by Sun Tzu. Everyone's heard of that. No, The War of the Art, or The War of Art, is for anybody who feels like they are unable to start, or even worse, is unable to finish. Pressfield names the biggest enemy in this book, which is resistance, and, that voice in your mind which says that you're not ready, and you're not good enough, and you're not worth it, However, Pressfield doesn't romanticize the idea of getting used to this bullshit that goes on in your head. Instead, he exposes the real truth about the nag in your mind constantly telling you that you can't do it. And he creates this book so that it doesn't create excuses for you. It reminds you that doing the work is simply the only way through the nag in your mind. The next book is probably one of, if not the most popular on this list. Sorry, I think I moved away from the mic when I said that. One of, if not the most popular on this list, but it's also one of my favorite books of all time, which is Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. And I'm sure everyone's heard the premise, some dude wakes up as a fucking bug, but no. So basically all the book is really about is the idea of waking up one morning and you are simply not yourself. The setup is that. However, Kafka's real genius in this book isn't in the transformation of man to bug, and instead it's in the isolation of being the bug. The quiet horror of being, don't know why I said it like that, I think I said being and becoming together, becoming, unrecognizable to the people who you loved and who once loved you. And if you ever felt like that you're changing from one person to another within your life, or you're in a very unclear and unresponsive period of change within your life, I think this book is, a gem, which, like I said, it is very popular, but a lot of people still haven't read it. All it really is simply the feeling of changing and no one around you knowing how to handle your change. And this book does that really well, and it gets under your skin and it stays there. Like, this book, it's fucking weird when you read it. I mean, if I didn't explain the premise to you, the first sentence in the book is literally like, I wake up with a hard back shell or some fucking, like, he's a bug. He's a fucking big ass cockroach or some shit. I don't know. The next book is Letters to a Young Poet by Rainer Maria Rilke. Rilke. Rilke doesn't tell you what to do, and instead he invites you to go inwards. The letters in the book itself are full of soft-spoken truths, which they're primarily about solitude or about creation and love, and very specifically uncertainty within life. If you're in the season within your life where answers feel very far away from you, the book itself doesn't simply offer solutions, but instead it offers a form of patience and a form of cope to, get around it, which is something that people don't really give themselves nowadays. People don't give themselves patience or silence to get through problems. Instead, they just try and find a way to, avoid it. The next book, which, again, I'd say this is probably the most popular. I'll take it back from the other one. You win. It's Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, which, yes, it is, a Stoic philosophy book, but it's not like that simple bullshit where it's like, be cold, don't let anybody know who you are, blah, 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 blah. Instead, it's philosophy for survival instead of philosophy for debate. It's a Roman emperor writing notes to himself in the midst of the war about death and ego and discipline and, all these tough topics, not as not as lectures, but instead as reminders. And because the book, the passages are so personal because he's writing them to himself, it ends up being such a universal truth, which is why when you read this book, I can guarantee you at least a third, if not half of the passages will directly apply to your life in that moment that you read it. You do not need to finish this whole book. Like, this is not one of those books that you sit down and read through the whole thing. It doesn't even need to be read in a chronological order. You will know when to stop reading this book. And it's usually right after it says what you needed to hear that day. As long as you get through every single one of these passages within your life at some point, you will have unlocked so much fucking wisdom compared to those around you. Which, I mean, if you're in a room with people with less wisdom than you, then change room. But the next is When Breath Becomes Air by Paul. I'm actually not sure how to pronounce his surname. I'm actually going to look it up. I'm looking it up. Give me a minute. Okay, it's pronounced Kalantany. Hopefully. But yeah, the book is called When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalanithi. I'm sorry, I fucked it up so bad. But it's written by a neurosurgeon diagnosed with terminal cancer. And this is, I'm pretty sure it's reality. It's not so much that the book is about dying, but it's about deciding what kind of life is worth living. What really matters to you when time is of the essence, when time is so short instead of being abundant like it is to everyone else. What remains when ambition starts to fade. The book is very sharp, but it's also very poetic, and it's very sobering as a book. And, you're very likely to actually cry while reading this, which, no, it's not a sign of weakness, it's a fucking great book. But you're not simply crying for him, instead you're also crying for the parts of yourself that you've forgotten to appreciate, because you think time is the abundance. Now, the last book is The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van Kull. I swear, I think I've pronounced that one right, at least this time, hopefully. Now, this book talks about the fact that trauma lives in the body. And it explains how in a very dense and, straight up way, but also in a very human way. It doesn't just explain the symptoms or the things that you can feel happening to you when you're traumatized, but instead it honors the symptoms. If you've ever felt like something inside you is shut down and never quite rebooted due to something that's happened to you in your life, This book will help you name that and try to help you fix it. Now, it doesn't promise to fix everything, but instead it shows you that healing isn't imaginary and instead healing is physical. Now, I can't remember if I said the last one was the last one, but I'll add one more last book, which is The Myth of Sisyphus by Albert Camus. Now, one of my latest videos is talks about the idea of absurdism and why you should become absurd. Now, The Myth of Sisyphus, I wouldn't say is a book for everyone. It is quite a tough read. However, if you're already in the existential headspace, which, the theory of absurdism puts you in, Camus doesn't simply give you a way out when you read this book, and instead he teaches you to find your own way through. He describes life as such an absurd and stupid and stupendous thing to appreciate that you shouldn't give in to despair. And instead of giving into despair, he tells you to rebel. He tells you to push the boulder up the hill. And he tells you to do this not because it's easy, but instead because meaning is something that you create, not something that you find, which is kind of the root of absurdism. So, as I said, this list isn't fucking 10 books that changed my life in 5 days, 5 books to read before I turned 30. If you scroll quite a bit more after searching that shit up, maybe you'll find a video which appeals to your procrastination mindset. However, this video is simply in place to tell you that the best books aren't always the ones with the biggest titles or the most popular ideas. Instead, they're the books that you find when you're ready. If you're searching for direction, maybe something like Think and Grow Rich will hit within your mind. Not because money fixes everything, but because the idea of a desire and clarity and belief plants a seed in your mind which you finally resonate with. However, if you're questioning everything, like I said, you should read things like Camus, read things like Kafka, Dostoevsky, all these popular books. Understand that these aren't the kind of books that might trend best online. Instead, these are the books that you carry with you. Not even physically as books, but I mean within your mind. You'll carry these ideas with you. Books that stay within you. Books that grow with you as a person. But if you're wondering what kind of book you should read next, skip the trend cycle of picking some bullshit like, I don't know, fucking Rich Dad, Poor Dad, something like that. Instead, pick something that makes you pause mid-page, something that makes you think about your own life and how the book applies to yours. Something that echoes back later to you when you least expect it. Because sometimes it's not about reading more and more. Instead, it's about reading better. And one book, and I mean one good book, can completely shift your whole direction. That's it. Thank you to the viewer who recommended me to make this, video here, I guess. Or inherently the concept. Because I enjoyed expressing what books I read. That's all I can say. You should get a Kindle. Kindles are really cool. I've got mine. I carry it everywhere and it's got fucking as many books as I need. Bye.